Welcome back to Around the World with Dane Waters. So let's get down to the next conversation. And as we were talking about in the monologue, what President Trump and what's happening in Gaza with the Israelis. And I'm honored as always to have Ejike Okpa with us. I mean, as I was joking that we should be you're a regular on the show because you're way smarter than all of us put together, man. So welcome to the
No,
show again.
you are very kind. Thank you. I'll follow you to wherever you want me to follow you to.
Well, thank you. It's very kind. So let's talk. Well, so let's get your views on what happened yesterday in the Middle East, in Gaza and Israel. What's your takeaway?
Well, it's a new day in the world, and I'm happy that only somebody like Trump I could stand his ground and rally the troops and get this thing done. I think, like we say in most, in my native tongue, Trump is an Iroko. He's standing tall, in the forest, whether you like him or not. The fact is that the world needs peace, and that part of the world is where the peace is most needed. And so, with peace, as we know it, comes prosperity. And so, let's celebrate this moment. Of course, tomorrow is not guaranteed, but I've always said it. I'm very, very happy that Trump, took, the bull by the horn and wrestled the bull to the ground. And so now let's look forward to what is next.
Well, listen, I agree with you that, as I said in the monologue, that we all want peace. Peace. No one likes violence. No one likes indiscriminate killing, but I have a little concern. And once again, I'll take my hat off to Donald Trump for really pushing to see that to see that Netanyahu and others really made this happen. So I applaud him for that. But I do think that calling it a peace deal is a little premature, only because they're only dealing with the first phase. They still have not dealt with the underlying issues of Palestinian statehood or non-Palestinian statehood, or what happens with the Palestinians. I mean, are you concerned that violence could start again in the region?
Well, like in a five-course meal, what do? You get the appetizer and then you warm up to the main course and then, you do the dessert and then you do everything else. I think we're all encouraged now, to sit around and do the dessert thing. I mean, do the appetizer and then we'll get down to the main course. I think, the Palestinians see there's a need for them to get into this and embrace it. And everything is like, give us a try. Let's try this stuff. Nobody's overlooking the Palestinians. Nobody's taking them for granted. I think they have suffered. Israel has suffered. But there comes a time when we all look at each other and say, oh, where is this going to lead us to? Since 1948, we've been dealing with this stuff. So now that we are celebrating thing again in Igbo, in Igbo adage, they said if when you praise a deed, another deed is done. So let's praise this one and then hold everybody's hand and say, hey, let's go forward. It says no loser, no winner. I think Trump didn't go there just with Netanyahu. He got the Arab, people around it. It's, Egypt was there, Qatar was there. You saw what happened to Qatar. First time, Qatar get hit. They were attacked. They say, hey guys, you better live up to expectation here. Don't If you have already our enemy, might as well become an enemy we're gonna target.
Well, listen, I think you're right about several things as always, and I do believe that it's important to recognize how exciting it is that the hostages have been released, and then hopefully that the rest of the bodies will be released, so families can have closure, because there's nothing more difficult to a family than not be able to have that closure. So let's be optimistic about that. But with this deal, I mean, President Trump is going to be meeting with President Zelensky on Friday. Many people argue that he's he's loving so much the success of what's happening that would, and he sees, once again, you mentioned about Qatar and the attack on Qatar. He even referenced in some of his speeches yesterday that he believes in doing things that are a little out of the ordinary and to try to bring peace. Do you think that there's a possibility that what's happened there that will cause him to give greater support to the Ukrainians to try to bring Russia to their knees to end the war?
Well, I think it's a stretch to say bringing Russia to their knees because Russia wants to be included. Russia often has always felt isolated. I don't know what tactics, excuse me, I don't know the next tactics Trump is going to use to bring, Putin to the table to where he said, let's make a deal. I think the world is celebrating this opportunity. The Israeli conflict, Palestinian, has been the longest. So now seeing what Trump has done, the way he did it, who knows what else he has under his sleeve that he's probably going to use and then bring another end to this unnecessary back and forth between two neighbors. Remember what I've always said: you don't have to love thy neighbor, but you could tolerate their neighbor. Everybody should have the opportunity to live a life the way they want it, as long as they are not interfering with your own right to do whatever you want. Is it mineral? Is it land? What is it that we're fighting for? At the end of the day, somebody gets a little space on the earth and get put over there if your body is recovered. And so come Friday, let's see what else is going to happen. But uh, Trump is he has the energy level. He's on an octane boost. And so let's keep going on this stuff. Let's keep going there. Those who don't like him don't like him. You don't have to like him, but you have to respect what this guy has done. Every American president has gone over there and did what they did. But Trump came in and said, 20 points agenda, take it or leave it. If you don't, if there's something you don't like, bring it to the table. Let's talk about it. But that's, like we say in Texas, let's quit horsing around. Okay, let's quit horsing around. Let's get this thing done. So that's what it is. Sometimes you have to let people know I have the stick, and again in Texas, we're gonna whack it. Okay, let's just we're gonna whack you if you don't do it. So sometimes the fear of God makes people want to come around and say, okay, guy, I don't want to be whacked, I don't want to be hit, let's do it.
No, no, listen, I agree. I mean, I've argued about Ukraine, for example, that we just need to, we got to stop just messing around with Putin and just make it very clear that, hey, there's a price to pay and be
Mm-hmm.
very strong about it. And I think that is one of the reasons that the Hamas has finally given in to the hostages is that they realized that they would be completely, totally obliterated if they didn't. So the power has its place in diplomacy, and I think that Trump has used it well. But as far as the American public is concerned, what do you think, with this victory dance that Trump is taking, do you think that gives him greater latitude from a foreign policy standpoint to do things? Do you think that people will be more supportive of his ideas about how to deal with foreign policy?
Well, even though foreign policy features in our concern, most Americans are more on the internal side of things. How is my job doing? How is my public safety? How is my border issues? So, of course, the distractors and those who are supporters, everybody's, have their own opinion about what has happened. But the American people now see that, hey, this guy he has what, 3 more months for 1 year in office before he get another 3 years. And I've always said if Trump had won the second term, he would be a lame duck president. But he took that break and came back and more like how you like me now. Remember the song? How you like me now. and it's like they don't know what to do with the guy. And again, we are just in the ninth month of him being in office. So what I think is one of those things. Like again, we say in West Texas, it's a bad weather, a good weather. You better sit back and enjoy, okay? Because it's gonna blow over. But he's doing a great job. The American people are seeing it. We have a midterm election coming again November next year, and if this momentum continues, despite the shutdown of the government, I think the Democrats now have a bigger issue, on their hand, how to convince their people that this guy, shouldn't, that the Republicans shouldn't win. The most important thing that the Republicans maintain the House next year, because if they lose it, of course, we're just gonna go by executive order, executive order, executive order, and then and then they're gonna wear him out for the remaining 2 years. But so far, for me, again, I'm partial. I love the elephant always better than a donkey, and Democrats again, that's their symbol. Okay, the symbol of the party is that of a donkey. I don't go to the zoo to look at a donkey. I go to the zoo to look at an elephant.
Well, as you know, I'm very partial to elephants as well, the real elephants as well. So, but let's talk about the midterms. I know we're supposed to talk about Gaza, and we're going to come back to that.
Now,
But with this government shutdown, um, uh, do you think that this is this government shutdown? You think it's going to help Republicans or Democrats in the midterm?
but yeah, I mean, this is not the first time. I think every party that is in power or every party that is opposing always look to this moment to say to throw mud at the other side. But a mudslinger always gets something on their hand. So I think by before the end of this month, we're going to have a resolution again, let the government keep going. But remember, the shutdown, it doesn't have, it's not that the U.S. Army soldier or military people have laid down their guns and everything and, gone on vacation. They're still doing, the essential people are still doing and they're getting paid. It's just, however you describe the non-essential group. But we've done it before. Everybody comes back, and then we keep moving forward. It's just the minor details of when two lovers just don't really love each other, but they pretended to be. So the Democrats are going to see what it is they want to extract out of this administration, and the administration is say, "Hey, it's your fault." Because you want to include in this negotiation something that is not beneficial to the American people. I think the sticky issue here is, having health coverage for illegal, people. As much as that, it's like, why should we even do it? Why should we, cover people who are illegal in the country? In law, one of the tenets of law is that you don't reward, illegal activity with with legal benefits. But again, they're already in the system. So what do we do? If you don't do something, you have a public nuisance out of their presence. So we go back and forth, but I think the government shut down. With what Trump is doing on international thing, it's just a kind of dampen that internal stuff. But he's going to come back to office and I mean to US, and then we face what we want him to face.
I know, and I think this is really interesting. Is the successes foreign policy wise. I think it gives him greater clout domestically in some ways, and especially with Congress. Maybe not with the
Mm-hmm.
average person on the street, and we'll see how he leverages that when he comes back. But the one thing I will say, I do understand the whole. Listen, I'm a bigger believer in smaller, less intrusive government. You know, but the dance sometimes is between what the rule of law is or the absolute law is and humanity. So sometimes
Yes.
things are not as always black and white in that regard, and it's always a tough thing. But back to Gaza real quick. If once again, let's celebrate what's happened. Let's celebrate the sausages coming back. Let's celebrate that the cessation of violence. But at the same time, Trump is not Trump, but Netanyahu is still up for with the ICC for genocide charges. Do you think that the world now needs to push that those be rescinded, or do you think that there's a legitimate basis for him to be prosecuted in some way?
But I mean, you remember when Uhuru, president of Kenya, was charged for something, and Obama, there was an intervention on Obama, and those charges were dropped. Uhuru and even Ruto, who now is president of Kenya. So ICC, I don't even know what the enforcement powers are, except they issue those resolutions and then they fold their hands and wait to see if somebody's going to be caught and put in a cage and brought over there. They could only do it with African leaders. Remember Charles Taylor, but
Yeah.
when it comes to people like Netanyahu, how are you going to do it? Where are you going to go catch him in a restaurant or have him,
Yeah.
invade his rest, sleep in. supporters, and then So the thing is, if this ends up the way we think it should end up, the Hamas come around, the Israelis come around. I was hoping that the leader of Hamas and Netanyahu somewhere will meet each other, even if you don't shake, but let them be within breathing space of each other. That also will have a symbolic gesture. But the International Court of Criminal Justice, yeah, as much as they do what it is they do, they are only effective if they're dealing with unfortunate African countries. But of course, they did it in some part of the old Russia bloc, but then nobody's catching Netanyahu. Remember, some people said if he showed up in New York, the gentleman who's running for mayor, that when he becomes mayor, he's going to, he's going to arrest him. Really, you must be, you
Yeah.
must be, you must be talking to some 50 graders who don't understand how these things work, and then everybody get excited. So I think genocide or no genocide, if there are ways, he can be reprimanded or punished for what he's done, fine. But, let bygone be bygone. But at least to the extent. Remember, he has issues with Israel as well because there have been some corruption issues within his attention, but he's using this Hamas thing, to sort of, get attention and cover up. Some Israelis don't like him, but again, if he's going to make them look like, hey, we are on the winning side, mm, those who don't like him still don't jump on bandwagon. They still want to, make him look bad.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a strange thing. The United Nations is not present in this whole situation. ICC, what's going on there? You got Trump probably going to be possibly win the Nobel Peace Prize next year for what's happening. Then you have Netanyahu up for war crimes, and you get Putin up for war crimes. I mean, the world is just a mess, and there's just so many ways, and we'll just have to see how it all shakes out. Listen, it's always, and I mean always, a great pleasure to talk to you, sir, and you enjoy Texas, but sadly our time is out, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. So